Hello, everybody out there. Welcome back. This is The Last Defense and your host, DC, today, hanging out and joining Mike B from across the pond. How are you doing today, Mike?
Doing okay.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, we've been having a pretty active week, as of late, and there's been quite a few stories taking place in the UK and in the US, over the last, say about a week or so. So tell me, what have you got your eyes set on these days?
Well, my last podcast, which I believe is going up tomorrow, if I recall our conversations earlier, is about a new policy out of the White House regarding vaccination policy. So, the quick and the short of it is there's going to be a dramatic reduction in the number of vaccinations required for US students to attend schools. Now, I say required with an asterisk because in most states, you get religious and or philosophical exemptions. You merely have to ask for the form, you fill it out, and you don't actually have to take these shots. But I say required in the sense that the official recommendations from the federal government, I don't have the official number offhand, but I believe it's upwards of like 70 something shots that a child would get from birth till graduating from high school. So about birth to 18 years old. That number is going to go down dramatically. It's going to be, I think, just several to a dozen shots that I don't have the exact number offhand, but it's going to be like I believe like a 3/4 or 80% reduction in a number of shots to be required. And I don't want to spend this whole episode on that, or my section of this episode on that, because I already did that in my own recording, which will go up later. But I do want to comment on it because last week, in last week's episode, we had a great discussion on artificial intelligence and the pluses and minuses of all sorts of applications for that new technology. And I've noticed that when I research for articles and or podcast, when I research something, the AI automatically, even if I'm typing into the traditional search engine for Google or Bing, I know those are the establishment ones and they're going to give the most establishment media answers. But when I'm feeling lazy, I use them. I know DuckDuckGo and some of these alternative ones are probably better. But when I use either Microsoft Bing or Google, I noticed something. They automatically give you an AI answer first, and all the traditional responses from individual websites are listed further down the page. And the reason I think that's important is, well, for one, it nudges the user, the researcher, to go straight to AI and bypass the traditional world of the internet. You can still find those links further down the page, but I was trying to research a specific question. So in the US, we have I'll try to keep the explanation concise, but we have what's called the Vaccine Adverse Effects Reporting System. This exists in place of traditional liability um, liability laws for any other industry on earth. So in other words, you cannot sue it is a true statement, you cannot sue a company, a vaccine manufacturer in the United States for damages, even if you could prove that you were or a loved one was damaged by a vaccine. What you can do is access a publicly funded compensation system, which is what I just said, they call it VAERS, Vaccine Adverse Effects Reporting System. And Harvard, this has been around for a long time. This has been around since 1986. So again, publicly funded, meaning the vaccine companies don't pay you for your damages. You, the user of the shots, do. So that's a problem in and of itself. But the reason I'm bringing it up in relation to AI is I was trying to get some data on how honest and thorough this reporting system is. And I asked it to, I think it was either Microsoft Bing or Google, probably both. And I noticed something right away. So my question was, how thorough is the reporting system? In other words, if you have 100 real life reactions to a shot, how many of those are going to end up in this reported in this system? And Harvard University did kind of a famous study about 20 years ago. I believe it was like 2006 or 7, whatever. And they determined that something like 0.5, less than 1%, or half of 1% of all vaccine reactions ever get reported into this system. So in other words, if you have 200 adverse reactions to vaccines in a given society or an American society, maybe one of those, half of 1% would actually end up in the system. So that's not good. That's not a very reliable system, of course. I've mentioned many times on the recording that I just said is going to be up, by tomorrow, I think, that the US media, public media, mainstream media, whatever you want to call it, is primarily the largest funder any given day of the week is the pharmaceutical industry. That's why when you watch like US cable news, you see commercial after commercial, buy this drug, ask your doctor about blah, blah, blah. Hardly any other country in the world allows pharmaceutical companies to do that. In the US, we do. Make what you will of it. But in any case, so when I asked to the Google or Microsoft Bing, what is the efficacy of this vaccine reporting system? AI really is taking over the search engine business. Yes, you can still search something on Google or Microsoft Bing or whatever, and you get your traditional, ping, 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 this website said this website said that. But really, AI is kind of forcing itself into that role. And I was listening to Joe Rogan talk about this on his podcast the other day. He's like, yeah, I don't use traditional search engines anymore for anything because with AI, you get, something that's more immediate, more concise. But I would say we should always take the results with a grain of salt because AI, as we talked about last week, is pulling from the mass of the internet, the sum of the internet. So I don't want to go back to screen sharing, but I'm just going to type something in and just if we get something really interesting, I'll screen share again. What I'm just going to ask the traditional question: are vaccines safe and effective? And effective. Let's just see what it says. Okay, it didn't go to AI for that one. Interesting. It went straight to links. And these are mostly links from there's the World Health Organization, there's the National Institute of Health. So these are going to be establishment answers.
Okay,
But
so there's some there's different platforms for AI, right? So the one that you used that when you brought up initially, that was Google Gemini. So that's Google's AI
right,
integration into the search engine because Google, I think it manages, if not 90% of all browser traffic. A
right.
lot of
So
people
it's the
use
one that a lot
Google
of
for
people
its search.
use.
So, and then you have Bing, and then you've got others. Now, when it comes to AI and search integration, we look at the top frontier models. OpenAI, we look at Anthropic, we can look at DeepSync, we can look at Kimi K3.
Yep.
Um, there's plenty of other ones that we can look at as far as frontier models go. And
What about
those are the ones
Grok?
that
Should we
pull from
try
massive
Grok?
data centers. Yeah, Grok as well. Yeah, Grok from SpaceX. And each of them have a level of bias. So Grok is going to lean more towards right-wing opinions, or more conservative viewpoints. And
Mhm.
it's a little bit, when he um, took over Twitter and then he renamed it X, a lot of that, what it did is it changed fundamentally the algorithm that was behind the software, behind the platform that allowed more people to post without getting shadow banned and stuff. These were some of the
Yeah,
grievances that he expressed when he took it over. I think that was sometime around 2022, if I'm not mistaken. But
that's right.
but that's one example of how you can tweak the algorithm in order for it to give you I'm not sure if it's a Boolean search, but it's more like it uses some neural networks to present or to curate all the data that you see. So Google, of course, you know, it's the largest browser, it's the largest share of traffic, and
Mm.
oftentimes it has to comply with a lot more regulations. Of course, remember we talked about the issue that was in the UK with the online safety bill. So YouTube, for example, may put forward more mainstream media news stations and content on YouTube and derank people like you and I who are actually, independent journalists who want to share our opinions. So these are
Yeah.
ways that the algorithm can change as well. But if you were to use, for example, OpenAI, or if you were to use, like, go to Google Gemini, that website, and then type in your search, it will tell you something slightly different. Although you did see some of the search results for Gemini when you saw the browser integration. So
Yep.
there's a browser SEO ranking, which shows what kind of data is going to, what kind of websites are going to show initially or have the highest ranks, that will show first. And then there's the AI platform, which has its own, neural networks and bias in
Yep.
its curation style.
So this got me thinking about something. I often complain. I've been a state house reporter here in Vermont for about 10 years, from about 2014 to about 2025. So 11 years, I guess. And I cannot find my articles anymore. Like, I'm looking right now as we speak, and I can find articles written about me. I see some hit pieces here. I see profiles made on different websites about me, which I frankly have no recollection of making, which is kind of interesting. But I don't see any of my articles. And if I try to type in specific articles, oops, that's the alarm on my phone. If I try to look up specific articles, well, first of all, they're not coming up. But when they do come up, it just says they're not there anymore. If I click on the link. So that's kind of, and this is not a new thing. This has been going on for years. I've
Has the
just learned.
has the website gone down? Like, has it gone
I don't
defunct?
know that it has. That's a good question. But it's not just that website. Like, if I look up my articles from other websites too, I feel like right now I'm looking up True North reports. That's the one that I wrote the most for. None of those are coming up. Let me see if I just try to click the website without my name. And I won't do too many experiments here because I know we want to get on to other topics, but I just wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about internet censorship, internet. Yeah, so that website's not even coming up anymore at all. When it used to come up, even when the website was working, like when it was active and I was working for it, on Google, it would come with a warning telling you that you were about to enter a dangerous website where you can get viruses, and you had to give it special permission just to go to the website.
So
So,
let me share my screen. I'll show you what's showing up here. Um, and maybe I'll do presenter mode here. No, no. Side by side. Let's go window. Here we go. So looking here, I see after typing yours in, Michael Belowski, Vermont shows up. It's got your LinkedIn. It's got Vermont Daily Chronicle, Vote for Vermont, Vermont Business Magazine. So these are all the places that you've been working at, correct?
no, not actually. Most of those are pieces either about me or about something I've written. The only one you mentioned that I actually wrote for was Vermont Daily Chronicle.
So, for example, VT Digger. This is
Yep,
that's your article, correct?
no, they've written hit pieces about me, but
Oh,
they've
really?
never published any articles about. They've probably written about me, but I don't think they've ever ran an actual article that I've published. But
All right. Yeah, that's weird.
anyway, I just find it frustrating because I wrote hundreds of articles, probably over 1,000 articles over the course of 11 years, and they're all just kind of like gone. Like, um, yeah, it's a little frustrating. And there could be all different reasons for that. I don't want to automatically assume that everything is censorship because I know that's not that's not always true. But all right, so I've got an article here. All right, so I'm clicking a profile on at muckrack.com. This is a basically like social media for journalists. So I swear that I don't remember ever making a profile of myself on this website, but nonetheless, there one does exist. So that happened.
So muckrack.com
Uh-huh.
correlates information across the internet and then uses AI to create a profile for you. I've actually got one as well. And it's
Okay.
just kind of like a gives an understanding about what you write about, where you've appeared, and things like that. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, Muckrack is it correlates that for a lot of different journalists, a lot of different kind of news sources as well.
Yeah, it's interesting that it does that like without seemingly without permission. Um, anyway,
Is what
it's
is
strange
what
to
it
me.
is.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's something we can come back to. Maybe if we do a bit more research on it, and then we can try to look at things like media bias in AI, things of that nature, suppression of different types of media, like the example that I showed you about with what YouTube plans to do. And it could also just be that your SEO ranking has gone down, which means
Mm.
that it doesn't show up in the, Google search engine as high as it
Right.
normally does because fewer people have read them. And that's happened to me as well with some previous articles I had written up, but it just is what it is. I think it's more of an SEO issue. But
Okay.
but yeah, I was gonna take it over to one thing that I wanted to point out quickly in the news. Is it okay to do that?
Yep.
Yeah, so we've got some very interesting updates taking place on the side of the pond. So in UK, we've had Nigel Farage, which, as apparently, of course, everyone knows, he's won the by-election in Clacton upon Sea. I was actually based out of Colchester not too long ago. So, that was basically the Tending Council, which is, of course, Clacton upon Sea is part of after they incorporated everything. And I just wanted to bring that up because it kind of takes me back a little bit, me living in Essex for a little bit, and talking a little bit about some of the insanity that's going on with this election. Are you ready for like an absolute banger to chat about?
Yeah, yeah. Well, we talked a little bit of preview earlier, but so he's getting investigated for something, right? They're trying to take him down. Somebody's trying to take him down.
Yeah, so the too long didn't read version of that is that he is being investigated for fraud and for not declaring certain gifts that he received prior
Mhm.
to becoming an MP. And there's a lot of rigmarole coming from him, on his side about why he felt he didn't need to declare
Mhm.
the funds. So I'll take you through this. I'll try to do it in about five,
Yep.
10 minutes. Just
Yep.
tie me down and just let me know how
Sure.
much I'm
Well, can
blathering
I start
about.
with a quick question? From a bird's eye
Yep.
view, do you think this is something that, and I guess we're about to find out because you're about to read all of it, but I guess I'm just asking right away. Do you think this is like a hit piece on him, or is there legitimate concerns?
Of course, it's definitely politically motivated and it's state power. So, of course, state power is wielded against those it wants to suppress. And that's in any state, whether it's communist or capitalist or any of that. The thing is that in his specific situation, my intuition tells me that he actually did commit that fraud. And I'll go into it in my explanation that I'll give
Okay.
to you. Now, here, I'll go ahead and share a screen and we'll go into the backdrop of this and then we'll go into some of the other issues that have taken place. So we have here, can you see this?
Um, I should be able to.
All right.
Yes,
So
it's
basically, this
switching
is all of
over.
the madness taking place at the moment. So the too long didn't read version is that Nigel Farage gained his seat back in Clacton. The problem is that after he's done that, the Parliamentary Standards Committee has decided to open the case back up again concerning the £5 million he received as a quote unquote gift from basically a tech billionaire. His name is Christopher Harborn, and he's a Thai citizen. And so he's English, but he has citizenship in Thailand because of, I guess, the investments or the way he's incorporated part of his business, or even maybe just for domestic, for like domestic purposes. Some of the things that are really interesting to note about this whole thing, the standards investigation is going back into the case. So he decided he was going to call a snap election. He was going to resign as an MP so that they would stop the investigation into the funds. And then after he received his seat back in Clacton, he wanted to use that as a way to vindicate himself, to say that, oh, well, because the people have spoken for me, that they trust me as their MP for Clacton upon Sea, that this will vindicate me in the news. Well, that wasn't the case. They just opened the case back against him. And so they're going back into the investigation. And what it is that should he be found guilty of the issue, he can face certain kinds of sanctions from the Parliamentary Standards Committee, the PSC. The commissioner for that, I believe his name is Greenberg, he has been looking into this, and I think that they're going to go for blood. I genuinely believe that. If this happens, he's going to have to deliver a formal apology in Parliament, and additionally, he could get suspended, which will trigger another by-election. I don't think he will survive a second by-election. This also means that for him, he may also lose a strong holding and position in the Reform Party, who was also receiving quite a few investigations, to date. So we can see some of the things here. The funny thing about all of this, he wins with 63.34% of the vote. Now, he's going against multiple candidates, probably the most number of candidates ever declared in an election. 34 candidates, including the infamous Count Binface, which I'll get to that in very, very soon. And the thing is that he said it was a people versus the establishment kind of election. Now, what happens is that you have multiple people in Reform Party being investigated. You have Robert Jenrick, who's a close ally and who's in kind of like a senior position in the party as well. You have Richard Tice also being investigated, who is one of the, he used to be the chair. Now he's, I forget his actual position in the party, but he's being investigated for undeclared gifts as well on his trip to Israel, which was sponsored as he was creating his Friends for Israel kind of like political wing of the Reform Party. So it's very, very interesting the way all of these things are playing out. And it's getting so much to the point that Farage didn't even show for his victory count during the election. So he said here, I am damned if I am going to stand on a stage having won a resounding victory and be demeaned and humiliated by nobodies. These nobodies are basically the people who were supposed to be attending the protests. What we found out, the Essex police found out that the people who were protesting were 15 minutes away. So it's like we're catching him in lie after lie after lie. So I'll give you a little bit more information about this. So the Parliamentary Standards Committee is basically the committee that investigates monetary contributions, gifts, bribery, and things like that. So the guy who gave him the £5 million.
What is that in dollars? Is that's a lot in dollars, right?
I would assume it's about $7 or $8 million, maybe.
So when you say gift, what do you mean by gift? Like somebody just gave him like a donation to the party or a donation to his political cause? What was the purpose of the gift?
So here's the funny thing about it. When the gift was declared, he received some of the money early May and then towards the end of May in different periods. And I'll get to that point because I do have the funds actually showing here. Sorry, not Malky Pulowski. So we have here in the Electoral Commission who are declaring the gifts, the different donations to political parties. These come all from Christopher Harbin. And we notice that he is a billionaire, if I'm not mistaken, because he owns the company Kinetic, which is a defense company based in the UK, but has extensive military contracts to Israel. And so what we notice here, these are all the different donations that have been declared as of August 16, 2026. So this is 3 days after the election took place. So you see here, Reform UK, Reform UK, Reform UK, Reform UK. Look at the amounts. It says one donation is £2 million. Another donation, £2 million. Another donation, £1,425,000. Another's £1 million. Another's 25,000, 25, 25, 20. You see how much money he's poured into this party?
Yep.
It's been shown roughly 37 million pounds has been contributed to the Reform Party.
Isn't that okay though, as long as it's for the party, or is it getting into personal hands where it shouldn't be?
I believe it's getting into the hands. Well, it's going to be multiple things. A lot of what I think is taking place is that he's donating to the party so that he can influence their direction. You have the convergence of Friends of Israel. You have a man, Christopher Harbon, who's giving £5 million directly to Farage, and then additionally multiple times to Reform UK. So I think what he wants to do is try to influence the direction that Reform UK is going to go into, probably make it a pro-Israel party, and he's lobbying for this by giving these monetary contributions. 37.1 million pounds to one political party from one individual alone is massive. I've never heard anything like that.
Right.
He also donated up to about 2 million, closer to like 1.8 to 2 million, to the Conservatives during the period between 2018 and 2022, if I'm not mistaken. And this was, guess who was in power at the time?
Oh, I don't know.
Boris Johnson.
Oh, okay.
So, so just as a kind of a little bit of a backdrop, a little bit of a backstory into this. So we see how many people came out. There were 34 candidates. That's historic by these standards. The electorate was 79,785 people. That's how many people could have voted. The ballots issued were 35, and the turnout is basically 44%. And I guess the sport ballots were people who were like wiping it with, wiping their asses with it for like newspaper, like toilet paper, or putting something silly on it or not filling it out correctly. We had him win by 22,239 votes. Count Binface is the Count Binface party. He won 9,455. And then everyone else got like negligible votes. No one got above 500. Everyone else got nothing above 500. There are 3 members from the Monster Raving Loony Party, which is saying a lot. Only got 28 here.
That's the actual name of the party.
That's the actual name of the party. Howling Lord Hope is this bloke's name with the Texas hat on.
Is that like a joke, or do they actually have a platform? And
no, they have a platform. They're an actual political party. Baron von Thunderclap. But here we have Count
who's that? What in the heck? The Count Binface party. That's funny.
Yep.
So are some of these jokes, or do all these people have legitimate
they
forms
stood
in politics?
In the election, they ran as actual candidates. So that says a lot. That says a lot about the state of politics in the UK. And something else I'll go into.
Yeah.
Move this out of the way.
Sure.
Going back to Christopher Harbon, one of the things that happened when he gave the money to Farage, I think it was declared earlier in the year, and then they were dispersed in several payments. So we can see this is going all the way from 2019. There's supposed to be more here. But I'll go into the other website to see donations. So when we look into his donations, the kinds that he actually, gave to them, you can actually track it on this website called Donations Watch, and it has it in multiple countries. So you can actually use this in the United States as well. And you see the total contributions. They have only recorded here 25,190,000. The number quoted by the BBC and other news outlets is 37.1. So this is actually out of date. And it's just mad. In 2026, in 2025 alone, he gave 12 million of his own money. So he's really stepped it up at this particular period. Now, one of the things is because of his ties to Israel, many people believe that he's actually trying to go in. He's trying to influence Farage. He's trying to get him to say, okay, you know, let's work with a little bit with the Israeli kind of ties that he wants to have, along with the Friends of Israel thing. When all of this started to kick off and people started noticing that he received personally, and this is the main charge, 5 million, he received the last portion of it towards the end of May. He then stands as a candidate and announces it on June 3rd. So for me and many other people, we're looking at it by the Parliamentary Standards Committee. You're only supposed to, you have to declare 1 year's worth of income or donations and contributions in order for you to stand as a member of Parliament. Once you are elected, you have to declare that. And this is no later than a month before you actually enter Parliament. So because this was a snap election, he resigned to avoid the investigation. Now they're investigating him again. And he didn't play by the right, rules. So what's going to happen to him is they're going to throw the book at him. It's going to be kind of mad. So these are the kinds of things that we're looking at now in this whole situation. I think it's going to go pretty poorly for him.
So Nigel Farage, when I think about him from across the pond in the US, he's been a guest on InfoWars. He's been in alternative media. For me, that's a big, that puts him high on the credit meter, because I'm like, well, if you're going on alternative media, that means you feel relatively good about yourself in terms of being out of corruption, because alternative media, by its very nature, tends to, I think, dig deeper and harder at getting to the truth at things, as opposed to the mainstream media, which it's such is not always the case. But this all sounds obviously not good. Now, I remember hearing Nigel Farage on alternative media in the US like 5 and 10 years ago, more like 10 years ago. Do you think that politics could have finally gotten to him, like special interest can change a man or a person over time?
Yeah. I mean, I strongly think that once they started the Friends of Israel group, that has a lot to do with the divergence in his ideas. There were also many other things. I don't want to just make it like, oh, Jews are coming to do this and that. I'm just going to keep out of that specific type of argument. What I do want to note is that there was a powerful lobbying group. They are forming their Friends of Israel group as a lobbying or a friendship group, the same way that Labor has their friends, their Labor Friends of Israel as well. So one thing that
a lot of Friends of Israel.
Yeah. It's just kind of to have those ties to it. I mean, you do think if you want to be like as logical about it as possible, in the UK created the Balfour Agreement. I think that was sometime around like 1917 or 1918, shortly after the First World War, where that declared that they were going to support an Israeli state. So that was Lord Balfour back in that old time. And so that's where you get that from. And then later on in the late 40s, that's when the State of Israel comes in, the Hirgana and the Nagash, and those different groups of people, the paramilitary groups, come in and just kind of, create the Nakba, which is another topic for another day. But that Nakba then leads to the formation of Israel as a state.
It does feel like in the US, I will say I was a MAGA supporter. I voted for Trump 3 times. I think he won 3 times, but that's a different discussion. In any case, he obviously won in 2024. As we've talked about in recent episodes, MAGA, or rather, I would say Trump, has gone off the rails a little bit. MAGA is supposed to mean no foreign wars. We have this war with Iran. MAGA was supposed to mean investigating the Epstein files. We doesn't seem like we got all those. MAGA was supposed to mean pushing back against big pharma. And I think in the last week that has gone in the right direction. But like 2 or 3 weeks ago, he just appointed a new lady for, I believe it's one of the top healthcare roles in the nation. And she was more pro big pharma. So a little bit of wishy-washy in that sector. But what else can I think of? The borders. Trump largely ran on closing the borders. Now, if you talk to the left-wing Americans, they'll say, "Oh, he's terrible on the borders." But really, what I'm hearing from conservatives is he's dropped the ball on that. You're not seeing immigration enforcement anymore, like you were in the first 6 months of the year of his second administration or first administration. So, in nearly every major category, it feels like Trump has gone away from MAGA to something else more establishment-ish or establishment friendly, business as usual, and not in a good way, as far as Washington politics go. And a lot of people, again, I don't mean to sound cliche or like on that train, but a lot of people point to the Israeli lobby in the US, especially with the Iran war, and they feel like that's the group. And I'm not saying Trump isn't his own man and he shouldn't take responsibility for his mistakes or going the wrong direction, but it feels like Israel has had a big hand in a lot of it. And there's a lot of conspiracy theories that Israel may or may not have had a hand in some of the assassination attempts on his life and or the lives of other victims in the United States. You hear Israel a lot in association with the Charlie Kirk assassination. I guess where I'm going with all this is, and again, I don't want to get on that like, oh, Israel runs the world. I don't think they run the world, but they do seem to have an awful lot of darn influence over U.S. and apparently UK politics. So I know
Well,
that's a
again,
mouthful, but
well, you mean you think about the two countries who were responsible for the creation of the Israeli state or the Zion. It's Zionist in the sense that you go back to Theodor Herzog, which is a Hungarian. He's the Hungarian father of Zionism, which is a political movement. I'm speaking solely about that. I'm not using it in the pejorative sense, but I'm using it in the sense of how it was created. So when I
yeah,
went to Hungary, they talk quite a bit about him. I think he was from Budapest, if I'm not mistaken, and he was a Jew. He hated some of the conditions that had taken place during his years growing up, so he decided to create the Zionist movement in order to get influence to create a Jewish state. I mean, that's reasonable in many ways, and so that's what it led to. The thing is that now, one thing I forgot to mention about Nigel Farage, when he was asked by the PSC why he was receiving that money, he first said, "It's none of your damn business."
yeah. It's a lot of
On
money.
live TV, he says that. He said, "I could buy a bunch of Ferraris if I wanted to." He then says he was going to be running as an MP, so he needed a salary of $1 million per year. But he's already receiving $1 million a year from his appearances on GB News. I think it's somewhere around 825 to £1 million.
Yeah, why do you need $1 million a year for any job? That's kind of a strange thing to say.
It's mad. He has 4 houses in Essex, and 2 of them he didn't even declare during the elections. This sparked an issue where Sky News investigated, and then he accused Sky News of harassing his daughter, who he put in the name of one of those houses. So, and then he says that he needed security. So his story has changed multiple times, and he's doing it in this cover up, which I believe personally is a bribe.
Mhm.
And
It does kind of
lo
look
and
that
behold,
way.
if that's what comes out in the committee meeting, that's what's going to happen. Now, going to your question about the influence of um, Israel and a lot of things, we know for a fact that's the reason why all of this war is kicked off in the Middle East, and it was Israeli intelligence that Donald Trump received. He then thought if all he needed to do was decapitate the leadership in Iran, that they would fold and capitulate like Venezuela did. Venezuela is a paper tiger when it comes to security.
Mhm.
I say that, and whilst I do agree that Venezuela has done some good things with his, money, PDSDA or whatever the company's company's named. Right now we have Delcy Rodriguez being an absolute shill. Like, I do not approve of her. She's kind of like the she's kind of like Bolsonaro, who took control in Brazil after having some strong ties to a lot of stuff. Now, one thing that I can say, another recent story. Did you hear the story about Donald Trump hiding in a catering cart?
Oh yeah, yeah, that's been all over the news.
Yeah, what can
Yeah.
you tell me about that?
Well, again, it's being blamed on or attributed to Israeli intelligence. And my understanding is Iran's response to the allegation allegedly is that Iran wanted to or wants to kill Trump, maybe because we killed their leader, the Ayatollah. But whatever the case, that's the allegation, is that they want to kill Trump. Iran, as far as I know, is making fun of this claim. They even put up like a billboard in Tehran, basically in like a comical way, making fun of this entire claim. Um, so maybe it's not true. I do know that a lot of analysis in the political world have alleged that Trump is being isolated and Trump is being not told the complete truth about any number of issues going on in the political realm. And if that is some of what's going on, then I believe it could make sense that he is being giving bad advice and or poor intelligence in regards to his own safety. And maybe they're trying to manipulate Trump. Maybe they're trying to spook Trump. Maybe Israel wouldn't mind seeing. I'm just throwing this out there as a theory. Maybe their interest within the state of Israel that wouldn't mind seeing something happen to Trump that could be attributed to Iran. Whether it be really the case or not is besides the point. All that matters is public perception, I think, when it comes to big events like that. But I don't know that I'm convinced personally as a journalist that there was really a legitimate threat against him where he needed to do all that. So I guess I probably should have started with this, but what happened was he got switched off the Air Force One, I think, right, and put onto a different plane that was like a commercial plane or like a cargo plane or something like that. The idea being that anybody who wanted to kill him wouldn't be able to find him or locate him. And it sounds like a dramatic story in the media, makes Trump look like he's, this daredevil dodging assassinations. But is that really what's going on? I'm not sure about that.
I'm going to go ahead and share this with everyone. This is a story about Iran actually offering to um, kill or capture US soldiers in the country for 30,000 US dollars. And additionally, they could potentially do this. They'll double the bounty if this is conducted by a woman. So, of course, there are no known deployments of US ground troops in Iran during this specific war, save for the time where they tried to rescue a Black Hawk helicopter soldier. Allegedly, the United States was able to rescue the person. We're not really sure if that's a credible story because, nothing really came out of it, and there was no speech or anything afterwards, to my knowledge. Now, correct me in the comments if you have seen else, otherwise. But what we see here, the story is, this is from France 24, but this has been published on the IRNA website. So Iran's military announced on Sunday that it was offering a bounty equivalent to 30,000 for killing or capturing US soldiers, with the reward doubled if carried out by a woman. So Army Chief Amir Hatami said the plan had been drawn up following a large number of requests to participate. according to the
Right.
IRNA state news agency. So this is kind of like the Islamic Republic Guard, National Guard kind of website that kind of gives the viewpoints. It's kind of like the Army Times or something like that in the United States. Now, we go into this. We have some interesting developments taking place. They say that there are no known deployments of U.S. ground forces in Iran, with exception of that Black Hawk helicopter pilot. However, what Hatami says here, he says anyone who kills or captures or hands over an invading American military personnel will receive a reward equivalent to 30,000 US dollars or 5 billion tamans from the Islamic Republic of Iran's army. So the army is going to specifically use this as a bounty system to mobilize the citizens of Iran and to hunt down or capture or kill any US soldiers that try to incur into the country. I think it would be very risky for them to do this as a way of going into Dubai or going into, Bahrain or Kuwait or Saudi Arabia or any of that. I don't think that that would be a very good strategy. However, what they would say is probably that they're willing to use this to secure their own borders. So that's going to be quite an interesting case there. And I think it's going to be really interesting if Iranian women decide to become like the old, honeypots from from the 007 movies, like the James Bond movies. But Hatami has repeatedly called on the US to leave the Middle East. And he said that they no longer have permission to enter the Persian Gulf, the Gulf of Oman, or the Strait of Hormuz. So there's a lot taking place there. Now, this is going to be quite an interesting situation. So there was the A-10 Warthog that was downed over friendly territory. The US also reportedly abandoned and destroyed aircraft used during the mission during the C-130 transport plane. There was recently an F-15 pilot that was rescued by a helicopter crew in a smaller operation. The war was later paused in April in a ceasefire that, after nearly 40 days of fighting, followed by the MOU framework that they were trying to get off the ground. That has since been dead in the water. So there's a lot going on in this whole story. There's a lot people could say about it, but I think it's going to give people the opportunity in Iran to secure their national, integrity and try to use this as a chance to honeypot some US soldiers, James Bond style. What do you think about that story?
So they're offering $30,000, the equivalent of $30,000 to try to turn over U.S. soldiers. I would think since they don't seem to capture that many, that they would offer more. That's my first thought. But I guess $30,000 is $30,000. That's somebody's annual salary in a lot of lower income brackets, and it's a lot of money. So
Wanted, dead or alive. That's the crazy bit about it. We're going back to the old Wild West.
yeah, but that's again, I'm surprised they're not offering more. That's my first reaction. But I would think that the rescue operations by the U.S. are, I assume they're sophisticated and very intensive in terms of technology, elite personnel, and that kind of money might not be sufficient to secure an American soldier or military personnel from being rescued. But that's the amount of money they offered, so I guess it is what it is.
It's probably a small fortune in Tehran. I'm assuming that it's probably going to pay quite a bit of salary for a while. They
Yeah,
have pretty much a very hyperinflated economy at the moment. So probably purchase power parity, it would work out pretty well for the individual who does capture them.
yeah,
However, generally speaking, the economy is in quite a bit of shambles, which is the reason why we had that story previously about them joining the new development bank to kind of circumvent those sanctions that have been placed on them for decades.
Mhm. So, and we had talked a little bit before about this fake. Well, see that's maybe that's Freudian speak. Maybe fake, maybe not fake threat against transport, I mean, Turkey or to Turkey. But was he leaving or going? I forgot. But he was like in the cargo section of an airplane and then like a truck. What do you think about that? Was that a real threat or was that just something to grab headlines and make?
I think it was a way for Israel to humiliate the United States. Honestly, there's no reason for um, Iranian officials to want to kill Trump after they've already won the war and additionally humiliated the United States and cleared them out from the Middle East. I mean, they've accomplished so much. It's just not really credible for them to say they want to assassinate him when he's, what was it, during the NATO summit, wasn't it?
Something like that. I know that the Iranians, I believe, officially are denying and or making fun of the entire notion. I believe there was a billboard that they put up. I might have just seen it in one of the articles that you were scrolling through when you were screen sharing, making fun of the entire notion of that they would want to do that. Like you said, it probably doesn't make a lot of sense from their standpoint. They already won the war. It's been a total strategic victory for them. Do you think it's a war of attrition now? The longer they hold out, the worse it gets for the US? Or do you think that the economic situation in Iran is also serious enough that it's an actual war of attrition?
Well, there are two things. Number one, the United States doesn't have any weapons to conduct a wage war any further. I think the main thing, the U.S. and Israel are going to focus on right now are massacring more Palestinians because it's the only people they can bully. And that's not even going to go well because one of the pre-existing conditions in the Memorandum of Understanding for Iran was to make sure that Israel stopped attacking Lebanon and they stopped attacking Palestinians. Now, that's one side of the whole story. So Israel's basically kind of butthurt. It's only attacking southern Lebanon, trying to take parts of Syria, trying to take parts of other places. They've gone into the southern part of Gaza and taken more space, taking more land from them. So I think they're trying to expedite the destruction of Palestine. That's really all they can get out of this whole situation. They're not going to mess about with Iran anymore. The other
Yeah.
half of that is integrating themselves into the BRICS fold. They have already been a member of BRICS for, if I'm not mistaken, a couple of years. And so don't quote me on that because it could have been 2025, I believe, as well. But nevertheless, they have entered BRICS. They are a member of BRICS. And additionally, what's going to help them is now integrating themselves into the BRICS pay system. Once they get that sorted out, they can circumvent sanctions by using the ruble, by using the Chinese yuan, and any other kind of basket of currencies they've got. Additionally, they can start with reconstruction efforts and then have countries come in to help them to fund those different construction projects, which is going to be instrumental in getting Tehran to recover a lot faster than if it didn't have any allies and had to rely on the international community to help them out. So some very interesting developments on that. I know. What's your take on it?
Well, if warfare, if you look at it from an economic perspective and get past all the missiles and battlefield stuff, it feels like BRICS is on the rise, and the petrodollar being the US dollars as like a sort of reserve currency, especially for oil in the world, that role is dropping. And I'm no economist outright, but I've been doing journalism for a long time. And it feels like the US is about to, and its allies are about to lose a lot of leverage in the world. Because if the US dollar is not the primary reserve currency for exchanging oil and energy and whatnot, then that means somebody else is getting that leverage. And that's probably BRICS and China, and by extension, now Iran. So that's
Yeah,
my first thought on all that.
it's completely upset the international order. And I do believe because okay, if I recall correctly, they began to join everything in 2024. And I believe that Israel felt that this would threaten its hegemony in the Middle Eastern region. And so what they decided to do was attack unilaterally in order to disrupt that progress and that integration into the system. It would empower Iran so much to the point where it would be difficult to stop them if they're able to use someone else's currency and
Mm,
others, system, because they've had to rely on the SWIFT system for so long, which is, I
mm,
believe it's developed in Switzerland. Um, but it is the Western de facto way of sending and receiving money. And now that
mm,
that's gone, and they can integrate into things like Union Pay and Mir, which is the Russian equivalent, it's going to just expedite Iran's recovery tons faster. And all they have to do is go through Pakistan, which is one of the reasons why Pakistan is a member of the Security Council, and Turkey is another member as well, because they're on the receiving end of that because they control the Bosphorus going into Europe. It was I was reading reports that Erdogan was not happy that it was not included in the European Union. So he said he had allies that he could work with. I think Erdogan's going to try to play that to go east again and play into the whole BRICS fold. So they're going to be a member of the Security Alliance and reintegrate themselves into it. Saudi Arabia is probably, because they're already a member of BRICS as well, they're
mm,
going to help with the Security Alliance so that they can kind of create a trilateral group to secure the capital that's going to need to flow in from this whole process.
mm.
So, quite interesting developments there.
Um, so this is kind of a broad question, but I feel like it ought to be on other people's minds as they watch this podcast. Are there no sects of American and or UK politics that say to themselves, look, it's 2026. China as a world power and economy is here to stay. Russia as a world power and economy is here to stay. Iran, apparently, as a world power and economy is here to stay. Wouldn't it be beneficial for everyone to get out of this mindset of working against each other and actually have, for lack of a better phrase, like a more of like a cohesion or get over it already, to put it, to use that expression, and just start working together? Like, why is there any groups in the Western NATO bloc that are scratching their heads and saying these battles, these wars, these conflicts are costing us a lot, they're not benefiting us a lot, they might not be benefiting us at all, really, they're definitely costing a lot, they're not helping our reputation, they're not helping as far as wars are bad, people die, things blow up, all that terrible stuff. Is there no sanity in any of the NATO bloc that wants to say, you know what, let's reach a hand out and smoke a peace pipe or whatever you want to call it, and actually try to work with BRICS instead of against them?
Well, ironically, I mean, it's funny that you mentioned that because under the Cameron administration, David Cameron was actually having a pint with Xi Jinping in one of the pubs in London. And so at the time, there was a good, thaw in relations between China and the UK. And they quite enjoy that. I mean, I had a Huawei phone at the time. It was sold in stores and all that. A lot of that pivoted in 2016 when Trump took place and he threatened the UK with sanctions if they chose to continue to use Huawei infrastructure in their, telecommunications equipment.
So
So
Huawei, for the layperson, I'm guessing that's like a Chinese company that does technology and phones and whatnot.
it's the equivalent to Ericsson and Nokia as far as
Okay,
telecommunications go. They provide massive infrastructure for it. They have AI, artificial intelligence. They
right.
have data centers they make. They also produce smartphones and computers and things like consumer goods. But their main
Mhm.
thing is AI, data centers, and telecommunications equipment.
A lot of this makes me think of a couple weeks ago. It's probably 3 or 4 weeks ago now. I did a podcast for The Last Defense about 1984, George Orwell. Well, that was his pen name. His real name was Eric Blair. I feel like I can't do an episode on geopolitics and not go back to 1984 again and again and again, because 1984 alleges that the author, basically via that story, presents the world, presents the global elite's perspective as they always want conflict. They always want turmoil because it's easier to control the masses. In times of peace, in times of prosperity, they don't, that's good for the masses. It's good for the lower middle class. It's not good for the elite. And in a book that I'm writing on politics, I use the analogy of Pinky and the Brain. Remember that Nickelodeon cartoon from like 20 years ago? It was about two lab rats that like escape and they try to take over the world. And at the beginning of every episode, Pinky goes to the Brain and goes, "What are we going to do today, Brain?" And Brain says, "The same thing we do every day, Pinky. We're going to try to take over the world." But
yeah, I remember that. That was Animaniacs. That was like
right. It was like a spin-off from
the
Animaniacs.
little shows they had with Animaniacs. I used to watch it all the time. I think it was on Fox actually. It was a Warner Brothers. It was a Warner Brothers cartoon.
Yeah.
And I think it was based off of kind of like the old ones from the 1910s to 1930s. So that's why they had those weird faces.
So I have a book that I'm working on geopolitics called, well, it could apply to geopolitics, but it's focused on Vermont. It's called Captured Vermont. And in that book, in every chapter, I go back to Pinky and the Brain again and again and again, because I think that's a great analogy for how the global elite are always thinking. They always want, maybe it's human nature, maybe it's the laws of physics. I don't know what the reason is, but people in power seem to just want more power. They never have enough. And you would think that at some point they might look in the mirror and say, you know what? I could actually have more power by being a good leader and empowering the people around me so that my name isn't on the wrong side of history, and so on and so forth. But it seems like most world leaders, at least in the NATO sect, don't think like that. You see the Greater Israel Project, which feels like madness. Obviously, atrocities going on in that realm with Palestine and now Lebanon. And then you have this Iran conflict, which feels like an extension of that Greater Israel Project, or Zionism, I guess is another way to phrase it. But do you feel like, I guess I need to come to a question because I keep ranting. I'll ask this. Do you think that all these conflicts between NATO and the BRICS nations are part of a larger plan to keep the world unstable so that certain elites can stay in power? Or is it just drunken madness, or what is going on here? Because it doesn't seem to benefit anybody involved, these conflicts.
Well, going back to the quote that you were talking about with George Orwell, and I think this may have been attributed to others as well, but it said power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. That's one of the things we talk about. So whenever you have a position of power where someone rises as a hegemon in the world, or there's an empire, I think it's endemic of empire to function in this way, because it needs to have state force in order to comply, to force people to comply with its reach. You think about the Roman Empire, you think about the, which other empires? Yeah, well, of course you had North Macedonia, under Alexander the Great. You had, the Napoleonic Empire as well. So there's a lot of people who were vying for power, and that's how we actually ended up getting the, I believe, don't quote me on this, may have been the Treaty of Versailles, but it was the treaty that basically said that we were supposed to create nation states rather than focusing on the proliferation of empires. I'm going to go back and I need to do a bit more research on that, because I don't believe it was the Treaty of Versailles. No, it wasn't the Treaty of Versailles. That was for end of World War I, like you said, and that was for the reparations that Germany needed to pay.
Yeah.
But case in point, the proliferation of nation states was to be an end to the age of empire. However, there was something that they were mentioning in a few podcasts recently. I think it was the Thucydian trap. Have you heard of that before?
No, but it sounds like a pattern that people fall into or that nations fall into.
Well, yeah, it's like when you have a hegemon that is trying to maintain its power, and then you have a rising power coming in. There's the inevitability that the two of them will clash,
Mm-hmm.
and that's essentially what was referenced to between the United States and China. So
Yep.
US and China are neck and neck in technology. In defense, the Chinese actually have a higher purchasing power parity, which means that they can afford more with less money
Hmm.
compared to the United States. Militarily,
Are you
I
talking
don't
about the government or individual families or both when you say that?
individual families as far as purchase power parity is concerned.
Oh,
Like the
that
average
is.
individual can afford more with less. And furthermore, if there was a conflict, I don't think that China would need to fire a shot. It would just have so many tendrils around the world where it wouldn't really need to do all of that. It would just sign a few
Yeah.
papers and then there would be US treasuries floating all across. You've seen what happened with Japan recently and the reason why the United States is bailing out Japan.
I know that their currency is not doing well. That's what I hear. That is correct, right? Their currency was collapsing or is collapsing.
It's getting weaker. And because of that, the United States stepped in to bail out Japan because Japan started to sell US treasuries in order to make up for to stabilize their currency. That was through their central bank, I believe.
Hmm.
And what happened is that prompted such a huge response from Washington that Trump stepped in, and I think Scott Bessent is that the guy's name?
Scott Bissett or Bissett.
Yeah, he stepped in and he had to bail out, or he had to create a mechanism so that Japan didn't need to sell U.S. treasuries and instead would use another kind of like swap system in order to bail them out. So it was
Hmm.
quite alarming. You have that front, you have Iran, which was the reason why they went in and tried to attack Iran because they were pivoting away. China's reducing its amount of US treasuries.
Hmm.
Um, Russia, I mean, I'm not sure how many they've got later, but China and Russia have also been buying up tons of gold, tons,
I don't blame
repatriating
them.
a lot of it. So there's a
Yeah.
lot going. There's a lot going on. Any final thoughts that you've got, like regarding all of this?
Well, I will say on an individual level, my family had decided to invest very much in hard commodities, i.e., gold and silver. And for the most part, it worked out for us. The gold, we kind of ended up using a lot of it right before it shot up a few years ago. So we kind of broke even, but we missed out narrowly on benefiting greatly from that. The silver we held on to a little bit longer, and we did benefit greatly from that. So, speaking from an individual level as a citizen and a family who invested in hard commodities, metals, gold and silver, I can say that it worked. Generally, I have a high trust in that. It's not fiat. You can hold it. You can't just print more gold. You can go find more gold or silver, but you can't just make it out of a machine. And so for that reason, although I will say I know that the stock market has the ability to manipulate the price of gold. And I think we saw that, I believe about 15 years ago. I believe Wall Street, they put it involved the futures market. They can apparently manipulate the value of things by betting if the value of a commodity is going to go up or down. And somebody, I don't want to guess the wrong one, but one of the major US investors dumped a lot of gold futures on the market and was able to manipulate it downward, even though there was no actual new discovery of gold at that time, at least not newsworthy or noteworthy. So some of that can go on. But in general, a hard commodity that you can hold in your hands and put in a vault is going to be safer than something that can be printed out of a machine. That's my thought there.
Cool. Yeah. Well, are you buying them as gold futures or are you buying the actual physical bullion?
We were buying bullion. I'm sad to say we've had to get rid of most of it, but we were buying coins. Yeah, coins that were physically gold and silver.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry to hear that you had to give some of that up, but I mean, such is life, especially in this economy. It's pretty rough.
Yeah.
By the way, it came back to me. I did a little bit of clicking around on Google. The Peace of Westphalia was
Mhm.
the beginning of the nation state.
So nation state as opposed to empire. So is the idea that if you have nation states, you have smaller centers of gravity, so to speak, governments, for lack of a better phrase, and therefore you have less, in theory, I'm not saying it always works out this way, but in theory, less massive control over wide swaths of the world, like the Roman Empire, Soviet Union, the former British Empire, maybe current but dwindling American Empire. Is that the idea of that treaty? Is have smaller centers of gravity, smaller states, nation states?
Yeah. And additionally, I got the other thing wrong. The Treaty of Westphalia, or the Peace of Westphalia, was during the 30 Years' War. So it was not the Napoleonic Wars. It was the 30 Years' War that took place in Germany and parts of that. So what I need to do is go back and do a little bit of my research to make sure that
Well, that's all right.
I'm
We're
getting
looking
just a
this
few of
stuff
these
up on
things
the
correct.
fly. Yeah, we're moving through a lot of topics and on the fly, so it makes sense that we would have to check things here and there.
Yeah,
And
it's not a problem. But I mean, it's good. I love to do some research on these types of things. I just want to make sure I'm getting it right. And if my spidey sense goes off that I've done something incorrect, then I definitely will go back and try to correct that.
yeah, and I will
But yeah,
say, just to swing back to the very beginning of the show again, my purpose in starting with the discussion on AI was yesterday. And again, there's Microsoft Bing, there's Google, Gemini, there's different ones, as you mentioned, for AI. The one I was looking up yesterday for my podcast, I felt like I was getting the establishment media answers. But then when we did it on air here on the show, I was getting different answers that actually I felt like we're a little more honest. So that kind of threw me off a little bit. But I guess the point of all that is AI, you never know what you're going to get. One AI from another might be looking at, it might have different algorithms programmed with it. It might be looking at a different body of knowledge or data. It could be who owns it, if there's one of my sons. Anyway, Elon Musk owns Grok, so you're going to get different results with Grok than you'll get with Google Gemini and so forth. All those things probably play into it, so you never know what you're going to get.
yeah, definitely. Very, very true. We're gonna end it on that. But I do appreciate meeting up with you, having this nice
Mhm.
long chat. Going through all of the different topics going through the week, because there's a
Mhm.
lot going on, so much going on. So I think we'll have a
Sure.
lot to discuss next week as well. Um, yeah, that's pretty much it for everyone. This has been The Last Fence.
Okay.
It's DC, Mike B from across the pond. So we're covering
Cheers.
all of your transatlantic news that we can find, muster up throughout the week. It's a pleasure to have everyone on the podcast. If you like what you see here again, be sure to ding that notification bell, like, share, subscribe, comment, do all those nice, happy, soft things that help to boost us in the algorithms. And we will see you next week for the next edition of TLD. Take care, everyone, and see you
Mhm.
again.